sounding like there were two different valuations for different Trump properties. One is what they tell the bank, and then, I'm sorry. So I may have a detail wrong, so let me back up. So Trump said that the management estimates, the estimates that management themselves put on the properties, came with gigantic disclosures that say these are just for management, don't depend on them, do your own research if you wanted to know what we're worth, which is what you'd say to a bank. Now, Hannity said something that I'm so angry at myself for not having thought of the same thing. Just the most obvious thing, Hannity says. He says, since when does a bank take your word for what your building is worth? That's never happened in the history of banks. And as soon as I heard that, I was like, wait a minute, how could there possibly be fraud? Because the process requires the bank to look into it on their own. It requires it. It's not even optional. There's no bank who doesn't do their own independent look at the value of property. That's not a thing. Have you ever tried to get a loan on your house? Do you think they're not going to look at the house? Of course they look at the house. That's the most basic thing any lender would do. And why I never thought of that, like why that never occurred to me as the most important fact in all of the story, I don't know, it just escaped me. But thank you to Hannity, because it took Hannity to surface that fact. And as soon as I heard it, I was like, oh, this is obviously bullshit. If you put those two things together, that the management disclaimers had more than a page of don't trust this. This is management's estimate. If you know that every management values their assets higher than every bank, what does that tell you about this case? Every management, there's probably never been an exception, every management values their own properties higher than a bank does. Why would that be? Because they do it for different reasons. The bank is picking, generally there's an argument for a range of value, right? If you're subjectively looking at buildings and saying, what are these valued? There's usually a range from the lowest it could be worth to the highest it might be worth, and that could change over time. So you're estimating, right? It's not even so much what it's worth today. You also have to estimate, will it still be worth that during the course of the loan, because that's your collateral. Now, which of those two things, the top of the range or the bottom of the range, would management naturally and quite reasonably take as their estimate? Management would take the top of the range because they want to tell you they're doing well. And it's within the argument that's not crazy. It's like there's a range that reasonable people could put on this. So management will always take the top of the range every time. Not just Trump. Every management, everywhere, all the time, they're going to take the top of the range. Now, what's the bank do? The bank has to protect their loans. And the most devastating thing is if you don't get paid back. That's the worst. So when the bank looks at your assets, do they take the top of the range or do they take the bottom of the range? Of course they take the bottom, and they determine the bottom on their own. They don't take your word for it. They don't take management's word for what the bottom is. They calculate that on their own. So in every case where you see a major company like Trump's getting a bank loan, in every case what you should expect is that completely legally, management is saying we accept the top of the estimate for our value, and the bank is saying, we play it cautious, so we're all guessing. So we're going to take the bottom of the estimate to make sure this is a good loan. Now, here's the next thing. Apparently, Letitia James said long before she had the job, when she was campaigning for it, that she was going to sue Trump every way she could. And she said it repeatedly. And she said that before she had any evidence of any crime, that she would sue him repeatedly with no evidence of any crimes. And then she got the job, and then she brought this case, which as we look at it, if you know anything about banking and anything about management, I don't even see an allegation here. It's supposed to look like the bank had a lower valuation than the management. That's the only way it's supposed to look. it should never look any other way. That's the only way it should look, and she's decided that's evidence of a crime, apparently. Now, I don't know the whole details, but that's what we're told, that it's based on that. Now, as Dershowitz says, that the Trump team should be motioning to have her removed, at least from the prosecution. How in the world could you have a legitimate prosecution when the person doing it said in advance they would prosecute him no matter what the evidence was? That's the end of the prosecution, right? So, yeah, it's a civil case. I'm a little confused about the criminal versus the civil element of that. So, yeah, I have some murkiness on that question. All right. So, I take Dershowitz's opinion, as I always do, as the better one in every situation, it seems like. And I agree that Trump doesn't have any real risk here. But the Democrats need to have at least one Trump is in trouble story going at all times, right? So once this one collapses, it probably will, they're just going to queue up the next one. And it won't have any more legitimacy than this one. They just have to have one that's sort of running at all times. There always has to be one. Yeah, and if it's not him, then they'll use his friends. Well, Mike Lindell is, yeah, whatever.